I want to support this motion, and I think there's an urgent need for an affordable housing scheme, and I want to thank Sinn Féin for bringing it. However, it's only a small part of what is required to deal with the national housing emergency. That is what it is, an emergency, and it's important to name it. Without recognising and naming the problem, it's not possible to do what is required, and that is to produce an overall comprehensive policy on housing, within which the provision of homes for our people is seen as a fundamental human right, a prerequisite to a functioning democracy and an essential element of any country describing itself as a republic. What we have to date, however, are policies that have tinkered with the system in a piecemeal manner, from rent pressure zones that haven't worked, and I can clearly tell you that from my experience in Galway, a Help to Buy scheme which has actively promoted the market, a small allocation of affordable homes, money for affordable homes, which was welcome but so minute as to not make a difference, and a vacant site levy which has been delayed in its implementation. And all of these tinkering piecemeal initiatives are premised on the fundamental premise that this government, the previous government, including Labour, believed that the private market will provide what are described as accommodation units. Not only is there an utter failure to recognise that such housing policies are a major cause of the ongoing emergency, Minister, but even worse, your government is actively, in the guise of misnaming social housing, actively promoting the private market. The past and present government have promoted the housing assistance payment, the language in Galway City, which still continues to this day, and in my time as 17 years as a councillor, since HAP came in, we were told it was the only game in town. The emergency has arisen, not by accident, not overnight, but like with the health service, as a deliberate consequence of your policy and the previous government's policy that the market will provide. It is an absolute scandal that 70 years after the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, interestingly, the same year Noel Brown tried to bring in his mother and baby comprehensive scheme, in the year that the Universal Declaration of Human Rights set out in Article 25(1) that everyone has the right to a standard of living adequate for health and well-being for himself or herself, including food, clothing, housing and medical care. And here we are 70 years later, and the most basic fundamental right to shelter and a home is lacking. And not alone is that bad, but the use of language to hide that and the use of statistics is absolutely frightening. I live in a city where I know for a fact that there are approximately 5,000 households on a waiting list. One I'm very familiar with going back to 2002, and it can correlate, if you have any influence, in that 16 years that household has never once been offered a house. And in this document here from the department, I suddenly find out that the Galway City housing crisis has completely not been solved, but magically reduced. And so in the city we've gone from 3,322 households on a waiting list down to 2,219, the biggest percentage drop in the whole of the country, 33% in 9 months. Now, I know 9 months is a pregnancy time, but how they managed to get that down without one single house being built in Galway City since 2009. We haven't had one direct build. So one has to ask, what's going on here in my city in Galway, where there's no overall plan for our land? We have no shortage of land. We have no shortage of public space in the docks in Kent Station and on land that we bought at huge prices, which is now sterilised, 2/3 of it for a road that's going nowhere. And no overall plan, and we have somebody putting up office blocks for 2,700 workers with no accommodation. And they got around that by putting up accommodation for students from overseas that will pay a fortune. We are back to business as usual, developer-led in Galway City, despite all of these documents and rebuilding Ireland. And yes, you are rebuilding Ireland, but you're rebuilding it once again in the developer's name, while you deprive our people of a home, which is absolutely unacceptable to me, because without a home, without security of tenure, people cannot participate in a democracy, and clearly that's what this government wants. And once again, thank you to Sinn Féin.